Singaporeans are told from young to aim high when it comes to their careers. You work hard in school, get good grades, and you land an ideal job. But what happens when you do all of that and still end up in a role that doesn't quite match your expectations or what you've studied for? Welcome back to the Work It podcast. My name is Nat, and with me, as always, is my co-host Gerald. Now, Gerald, according to an MOM survey, nearly 1 in 5 Singapore workers were overqualified for their jobs last year. And this is just one part of a bigger issue under underemployment, where your educations or your skills aren't fully utilized in your job. I don't know, have you spoken to a lot of clients who face these kind of situations?
All the time.
Right.
Sometimes I wonder whether this 1 in 5, is it just 1 in 5 because of definition? Or if we look at maybe mismatches, right? Maybe there's a lot more because there's so many people who do jobs that they're not studied for. You know, I'm sure you met many people who are like that.
Yeah.
Right? So I do wonder, like, you know, this thing about what you studied and what you work as, does it really have to be the same all the time?
Well, we're going to find out from a young person who is exactly what we talk about, you know. We're going to hear about why she made those choices and the experiences that she has gone through and how she's thinking about what comes next for her career. So, welcome to the show, Dhareeni Shanmugam.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us on the podcast, Dhareeni. Now, just for some context, can you start us off with what you studied? I guess when you studied this and when you graduated, and then lead up to what you got into for your first job.
Okay, so my name is Dhareeni. I originally studied international relations.
Okay.
So I graduated from University of London. So I graduated in 2021, like end 2021. And then because that was the height of COVID, I went into communications because international opportunities were not there so much. And then 2 years later, I decided to pivot into something that's more related to what I studied. So higher education, I mean, specifically international schools and all that.
So, Dhareeni, I want to take you back to the time when you first graduated. What did the ideal career look like for you then?
So the ideal career back then was actually working in the UN or bigger NGOs or MNCs, you know, being able to commit to a cause globally. You know, be it going down to different affected regions, being able to provide some form of service, being able to like perhaps improve education in certain areas, perhaps, you know, being able to eradicate poverty. That's a very big one. But those kind of missions, those kind of possible services, I would say that was where my ideal career would have been in at that point of time. But then, of course, you know, with COVID, everything happened. We had a lot of lockdowns and shutdowns, and all the opportunities were kind of evaporated overnight.
You know, and as you were graduating, you were looking at the job market. The roles that you wanted were not there, and you had to find yourself to find something else, right? How did you like adjust yourself, you know, come to that place of acceptance or maybe even adapting to
compromise.
To compromise. You know, how was the process for you?
I think thankfully, because before I got into my first job, I was volunteering quite actively. I would say I was volunteering with ACRES, I was volunteering with the mission home. So my role as a volunteer back then was actually to help them produce digital marketing materials, you know, being able to tell different stories of the residents there.
That's a very smart move, actually.
Yeah.
Because I think the experiences we gain outside of school actually are very, very pivotal, whether it's an internship or even volunteer. Everything can be considered and counted towards our career.
Yeah, because it all chalks up to experience, right? It's all experience that you take with you, and then it informs all your decision making. But Dhareeni, I understand that, you know, from then you've moved through a few different jobs over the years, and now you've landed yourself a role in admissions and finance in the university.
Yep.
So tell us, I guess, about your current job, you know, your day-to-day, what it kind of entails you to do, your roles and responsibilities.
Right now, it's actually the interview season, so a lot of it was day to day. You know, preparing for upcoming interviews. A lot of it's admission interviews. So you know, when you have lots of students, be it local students and international students, helping them facilitate, like for example, the time slots and all that. So if you're working with international students, we have to be mindful of their time zone differences as well. So a lot of it is really coordinating all of these. Also things like, you know, with documentation, verification, so a lot of cold calling, sometimes calling up students, sometimes even calling up parents as well, to kind of make sure that everything that they need to submit in is like really there. Yeah.
Right. And I imagine, I mean, like you said, this is not exactly where you saw yourself working when you started studying at for your degree. Would you consider yourself overqualified for your role?
Perhaps if this was I was working in an MNC or an international organization, then yes, I would be overqualified for the role I am. But because higher education was a very new space that I got into perhaps 2 years ago, I would say. So it's in that sense, I wouldn't say I'm overqualified. I think I'm just nice, like just right there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just to clarify a little bit, when you did apply for this job that you have now, did it require any specific qualifications?
You could either be a diploma holder or a degree holder. I think for most of the employers or for the interviews I go to, it's very understandable that they're looking for people with the skills rather than the education. So of course, I mean, education is like the bar, like, whether you qualify to like some of the roles, but then really it boils down to the interview and the kind of conversations you have with the interviewer. Yeah.
Right. I think even just listening to you talk about your past work experiences, I think we really see very different skill sets being used, right? From the first job and even right now, it's almost like you're using very different sides of yourself.
Yep.
But yet there's also still that flavor of international relations, engaging with people, communicating. That seems to be that common thread that runs across these things. Is that something that you see for yourself as well?
I think sometime last year after I joined international school where I was communicating with different nationalities, I think the one thing I've come to terms with is that while yes, it may not be the international organization I'm looking for or the big cause I'm looking for, I would say that a lot of these educational institutions have specific sectors or specific offices that are meant, to do international work. So I think that's where my ideal has now moved, in that sense that from perhaps IO or doing really big work, it has now moved to perhaps making a student's life better, but just that in a different scale. So it's really like, perhaps for students, if they're going overseas to achieve things, like be it their volunteering or for their academics and all that. So being that support system is also a way that I realize I can provide for the cause.
Gerald, when we talk about overqualification, I understand there's usually different buckets under which people can fall under, right? There's the mismatch in salary, maybe there's mismatch in your experience, and there's mismatch in your qualification. This experience that Dhareeni has is more of the qualification not being quite a match for what her role is now.
Yeah.
Is this something you see very often?
Yeah, for sure. I think we have this, maybe it's an illusion, I would say, that what you studied for, there's like that job that perfectly fits what you studied, and I think it's not quite like that. And what Dhareeni is showing us from her own experiences is that she's taking more than just her degree. She's taking extensions of her life from her volunteering, from maybe her internships and here and there, combining them together to understand what she really likes to do. And then she went in with a few experiences, tried different job roles, allowed herself to really look at what she can do, build up those skill sets, at the same time reconnecting back and to find that common thread. I use that word common thread a lot because it's like the narrative, right? Like I am a person doing international work. Maybe not quite in the NGO, non-government organization, but I am helping someone in the international setting, helping international students. And if today that's the part that we can all personally sense make, we cannot wait for a job to give us that part, to make us feel like we fit. I think we have to start to find a way to make ourselves fit into the job roles that you have.
I wonder how aware your manager or your boss or even your fellow colleagues are of your education, like what you studied in school versus like what you're doing now.
When I was speaking to the team and all that, it wasn't so much about the education. I think it was really the skill set that I brought with, because previously I was with international school as well. So, I was comfortable speaking to students, I was comfortable liaising with parents, I was really comfortable with data work as well. So I think all of like being able to do all of that and also having that chemistry with your team, I think the instant that your interviewer realizes, oh, she actually would be a perfect fit, or you have that chemistry with the team ongoing, they'll be more inclined to hire you. I think that's the general like consensus that I'm getting from people.
For your friends and the people around you, when you were looking for a job, did they wonder about why you're making certain job choices? Were they worried about, were you going for a job that's a bit maybe for a diploma level, for example? Because at that point of time, everyone was just, I guess the mindset was, if you can get a job, it's great, right? It's great. So I don't know, was there like that pressure or expectations from people around you that, you should get something that's very closely related to what you studied and also at the same level? Was there that kind of pressure?
I think initially, yes. There's a lot of the, I have studied my degree. I should meet a job that has that requirements. But then over time, like when you realize 2-3 months in your job search, you don't have any other options, I think that's when you have to pivot to the skill set that you have.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that was my wake-up call in that sense, because I had a lot of pressure. I wanted to go into like, government boards. I wanted to go into like big NGOs and all of that. But then I noticed that, as much as they weren't hiring, the skill set that they wanted was also not something that I had. In that sense that, it came with certain level of experience or certain level of the kind of work that previously you've done on the ground. But then back then we didn't have that kind of opportunities when COVID hit. That is when I felt that, okay, I needed to switch. Or like if I couldn't switch, I think I would have been stagnant in not having a job. Yeah.
So I remember like there were perhaps jobs, a lot of jobs there. Sometimes you see they will list out the requirements, like maybe a general, unspecified diploma/degree. Were those kinds of jobs that you were aiming for?
Yes, definitely, okay. Yeah. But also depending on the kind of skills that they needed, that's when I would apply.
Right.
So if I didn't have the skills, I would totally avoid it. But if let's say the JD specifies things like a good degree with maybe 1 to 2 years of experience, which I've kind of acquired through internships and volunteering. And then also like, for example, they said like good communication skills or social media knowledge. So stuff that I've really had, then I would apply for the job. I wouldn't just blindly apply. I would just really be targeted as to the kind of roles I would have wanted to get. When I applied.
What really strikes me about that is that, unlike the topic that we're talking about today, I more fall under the underqualified as opposed to the overqualified. I don't have a degree. And I realized that the way that you hunted for jobs, Dhareeni, is the same way that I hunted for jobs before I had any experience to speak about. I would look out for the skills required, any soft skills that I could apply myself to, that I could say that, on some level I do have these skills or experiences. And then I would apply to those jobs to try and get my foot in, gain some experience, and then be able to use that experience to feed my resume.
It sounds like as we are talking about overqualified, underqualified, but the common thing here is the experiences, right?
Yeah.
The evidences of your ability to do something. I think that's what employers also are looking for, right? These days, employers are not really looking for people who have the right degree or diploma or even the right subject of study, right? They're looking for people with tangible experiences to make things work. And you realize that all jobs are fast evolving. You can't hire based on a particular school and a course. You are starting to look for transferable potential, transferable skill sets and experiences in people. And many employers also starting to ask like, why? Why are you even applying for this job? What will make you stand out from another person with the same degree? Right? Something about you must resonate enough with this company and our mission, our vision, and our business for me to really feel that you are the right hire.
There's something that you often see in like movies and TV shows when people go job hunting and they're kind of overqualified for the work that they're applying for, is that companies will reject them and say, oh, you are overqualified, we don't hire you.
From my own experience, if let's say it's a diploma level job and I apply, I don't think I even meet the threshold for an interview.
Okay.
So that's one thing I noticed. And I think part of that is also because a diploma holder and a degree holder, more often than not, there's that pay difference.
Yes.
So I think the instant that you say that, oh, this is a diploma holder job and I apply as a degree holder, I think employers immediately have the expectations where, okay, the pay range is not going to be the same anymore. So it's kind of like I do not ever get callbacks from people who stipulates that they want a diploma holder, but then, I'm applying as a degree holder.
It really sounds a little bit strange, right? Because you got someone who's got all the experience to do something for you, but you are not willing to hire that person. And I think this is really on the employers, from the employer side, right? They could be thinking the budget, right? Because we don't know whether we can pay you enough.
Yeah.
Because you have high expectations, right? The other thing, of course, is sometimes it's the team dynamics, right? You coming in and maybe they're really looking for a diploma holder because the whole team is diploma holders, and then they might feel a certain way. It could be the fit there. And we especially see this overqualification, right, in maybe even higher roles, like people with PhDs or masters, and they're doing a role that maybe requires a degree. Most of the time, employers will be wondering, like, will this person fit in? You know, will I be able to keep this person? Even if the person says yes for a while, will they later on ask for more responsibilities or money? And will we be able to accommodate that? So then if it seems too troublesome and too much questions, then they might say, never mind, I'll just hire wait for the other person that has the degree that I'm looking for.
Wait for graduation season and then have their pick of the crop.
Right. So I do see that people, especially those workers or professionals who go for higher education, they often find themselves stuck like that. I've heard of people who say that they have to mask their higher qualification. Yeah, they don't declare in their resume that they have a master's or even a PhD.
Wow.
Because it sends a strange signal, especially if the PhD is in a very different domain, right? Then it will sabotage their chances lah. That's how they feel. So they didn't talk about it.
But is that right, or is that allowed? Like, not disclosing your educational qualifications, or is it actually like whatever? Because it's the same for the jobs you've had in the past, right? Some jobs don't really fit the job that you're applying for, so you leave them out of your resume.
Yeah.
So it's advisable to do that if you are overqualified and looking for a job?
I think in terms of advice for resumes, for example, I think what we want to present is a document that has as much relevance as possible. Anything that throws off, then that's where you might want to think about how you amend or downplay it so that you don't stick out. So that you look as much as a very possible attractive hire to the recruiter. So maybe at the interview stage, then that's where, if you feel comfortable, you think that this is going your way, you might want to tell them a bit more, because maybe sometimes you have taken a leave of absence to study, right? And then you need to explain that you did your PhD during that leave of absence from your work. Then that's where you can bring it up. At that face-to-face interview, you got a chance to, make a case. Right? And you can convince them better than, putting on a piece of paper and then letting employers assume wrongly or rightly, what they want to assume from what they see on your paper.
Dhareeni, going back to you, because you did mention that part of the reason that you sought the jobs that you did end up going for is that the job market wasn't really looking right for international relations. There weren't as many opportunities. But this would have been the same situation that your peers, your classmates, your batchmates would have gone through. So have you seen a bunch of them also not working in international relations?
I've seen one become a news producer. I've seen one work for like a data center as an inclusivity expert. I've seen one that gone into real estate. So, and there's one that's similar to mine who have also gone into higher education. But I think his role was a bit more interesting because his role was to do international marketing for a higher education institute in Singapore. So it was very different in that sense that all of my peers have gone to do different roles, but they do have some form of international relations used. Yeah. So I think that's the one thing that I honestly feel that it was really great that having the degree that I had opened up a lot more opportunities, I would say. That, because it's so interdisciplinary, we could do pretty much anything as long as we work in a international environment.
Between you and your friends, would you say that you are happy and satisfied with how things have turned out? Because, I mean, if today COVID never happened, maybe all of you would have been working in the NGO, right?
I think satisfaction is very subjective in that sense that, for people who were maybe really wanting to get into NGOs and failing to do so, that would have been really a heart-shattering moment at that point of time. But then a few years down the road, you find out that something else suits you better, or you are thriving in a different role that you totally expect yourself. So I think satisfaction can be also found there. So in my case, where yes, while I was very sad that I couldn't get into like big companies like UN or like really the bigger MNCs, I think I am very happy with where I am right now. I would say also this other thing where my role is a contract role. So this gives me an opportunity to actually go out and explore different educational institutions, being able to go into different departments, working with different students. So I think that itself brings me a lot of joy because I am being like a touch point for helping students out.
If you were to think of the future, do you think that you might still pursue a career in international relations somewhere down the road to kind of make use of the things that you learn in your degree?
Okay.
Or do you think that you've kind of mentally closed that door for yourself already?
I don't think it was necessarily closed. For example, if let's say after a contract ends and I'm applying for jobs, I would still apply if the role is still available. But I think in terms of comfort level, like where I've been and what I've enjoyed doing, I would still try to apply for roles that are in higher education, but also with the focus of international liaison in some ways. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're still kind of looking for that ideal career for yourself.
Yep.
It's just changed over the years
Yes.
compared to what you thought it would be upon beginning in university.
Mm.
Thank you so much for sharing your story with us on the Work It podcast. I hope this has inspired some people, to pursue the jobs that best fit them and not lock themselves in just after getting a certain degree.
We should never look at our degrees or our course of study as the limiting factor.
Yes.
Because we are so much more than that. I think it's more important to realize who we are becoming over and over again through the experiences and keep moving towards the direction.
Exactly.
After all, degree or diploma is just a starting point, right?
Yeah. So thanks so much, Dhareeni. Hey, it's the Ask Work It segment of the podcast with me, Nat, and Gerald. If you have a question that you're struggling with in the workplace, why not write to us? We might be able to help you solve it. cnapodcast@mediacorp.com.sg. Just send it over to us. For this episode, our question comes from our listener, Justin. Gerald, Justin is currently employed, but his contract is due for renewal in a year. Now he's quietly exploring new opportunities but facing a bit of a dilemma. So he says that reference letters are often seen as important, right? Especially when the job market is as difficult as it is. But he's wondering, how do you ask a current boss for a reference letter without sending the wrong signals? Because now he's worried his boss might interpret his requests as him having one foot out the door and preparing to quit, which just isn't the case. So Justin is concerned that this innocent request could affect his upcoming performance review as well, or even, his job security.
So because his contract is going to end soon, I feel that, it will be important for him to have some clarity about whether his employment is going to continue. Maybe the reference letter could become somewhat of an opener, or rather open that conversation for him about his employment in the company. So what I'm saying is this, like, if Justin is able to ask his boss about what will happen after a year or closer to the end of his contract, and then if the boss says no, we're not planning to keep you around, then make the ask for the reference letter, right? So this will also allow the boss to know that you're really serious, that Justin is really serious about his employment and his his stay in the company. Sometimes bosses, they don't really remember when your contract is going to end. So having that conversation earlier on the pretext of maybe the reference letter, it could remind the boss that, hey, look, this is really important to me. And I want to have some clarity on that.
So it's just a little nudge, it's a conversation starter, conversation opener, where the end objective is employment, whether it's here in his current company or wherever else he's looking.
And I also will add that, sometimes we worry that our boss will know that we are leaving and then it seems like a sabotage career move, right? But what if it's not? What if it seems more of like a showing the employer that I'm still here and I'm of value? So getting you to know that I'm not afraid to talk about these things because it's important to me. I'm putting myself in the headlight so that you take notice of me and my employment situation. And maybe the employer will say, okay, we've still got a year to go. Let's try to use this time that we have to secure an extension or continued employment for you. So it could work both ways. That's what I'm saying.
Okay. But one thing I am thinking about is, are reference letters really as important as Justin makes them out to be? Because I've had maybe 7 or 8 different jobs over the years, right? And for none of these jobs have I had to apply with a reference letter. I've never had to ask a previous boss for a reference letter, even though some of them have offered, So is it super important to have a reference letter, or is it an industry specific thing?
Yeah, I agree with you. The last time I remembered giving a reference letter for myself was when I applied for university. It was a long time ago, right?
Right.
In my area of work, I do hardly see people, using reference letters for their employment. What I see more often is the use of referees.
Okay.
I mean, character reference.
Right.
Someone who can vouch for you over a phone call or an email about your quality, your contributions, your value, and what you bring.
Right.
I think that one is very common.
Okay. So this is the ones where in job applications they say just put someone who can vouch for your, how good you are at the job or something like that.
So usually these reference checks come across over email, over the phone, and they do ask you for your thoughts about the person that you are referring for. They will ask questions like, do you think this person is a good hire? Do you think this person will be a good fit? What do you think are this person's qualities? How have you worked with this person? So it's pretty in-depth. In fact, as you get higher, you grow higher in your career, you take on more senior roles, these references become even more important.
Right. Okay. I can imagine that being easier for the employer who's writing the letter or being the referee as well, because then you don't have to commit so much time, put pen to paper. You just pick up the phone and then you're like, oh, I remember this guy. Yes. Yeah, they asked me about this person. Yes. They are like this, like that.
Yes.
So it's hassle-freer than a reference letter. So I can understand why things have shifted in this direction.
Yes. So one quick tip that I always give people with regard to character referees: before you give the employer, the potential employer, someone's number or email, please let the person know first.
100%.
Because it could be years since you met the person, right? And then you don't want the referee to say, who's this guy?
Right.
Yeah. So just let them know that you're applying for a job and you've just shared their contact with a hiring employer. If you can even prime your character referees to say that, this job is of this job description. I applied for this because of these qualities that I see myself. Maybe put in a good word for me.
I know a lot of people who have been to multiple jobs where they don't have the best relationship with their boss, and so it can be difficult to ask them to be a referee or to write a reference letter. Are there other ways that they can get this recommendation or this character reference for a new employer?
So if you don't really have a very good relationship, right, with your boss, one practice I've seen before is people who would write their own reference letters. Right, they write letters about their experiences and what they've contributed, and they ask the boss to eyeball, to check, and to change, amend, edit, right, before signing off if the boss is comfortable.
Right.
So I've seen that before, especially for some of the supervisors who don't really have a clue about what you're doing in your work. So this could be a way. It saves time for them as well. And if they don't mind, they can just edit a little bit and sign off the company letterhead. So that's one way. The other way, of course, is really going beyond the reference letter, right? But look at your brand. Look at your professional branding. And today we have social media like LinkedIn to help you to kind of elevate your professional standing within the online space. I think that's important because recruiters are now increasingly using LinkedIn to try to source for people. So having not just an account, but having a profile that actively displays your professional value becomes really, really important.
Right.
Every connection, every engagement you have with people on LinkedIn, it becomes somewhat of a character referee or some sort of a recommendation. When senior people or when people in the industry, they recognize and they engage with you, it signals similarities.
Right.
Yeah, it
right.
signals that
by association, if this person is good, like the person they're associated with must be good as well.
Yes,
right?
yes. And in fact, sometimes I do get the odd LinkedIn DMs. They ask me like, I saw that you're connected with this guy. What are your thoughts about this guy?
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know him well, So somehow recruiters or even people, they will look through your network, and they try to find common connections, and they suss out your quality of work and who you are.
Okay. Well, I mean, we are talking about connections, right? So that means this goes beyond just getting your boss to stand there and speak to your character. So what if for my reference letter or for my character reference, I just list my colleague? Like, is that an avenue that I can pursue? Is that kosher? Like, would people accept that?
Honestly speaking, usually for such letters, the person has to be a bit more senior or directly managing you. Having a colleague write for you, it's not impossible, right? It's not impossible, but I guess if the reader finds out that it's a colleague, right, then it really, really waters down the whole thing. I do remember having a case of someone before who had that not so good relationship with the boss, with the supervisor. So this person went one up.
Oh, to the boss's boss.
Head of department.
Okay.
Yeah, went to head of department and asked whether they would be willing, and this person wrote like what I said earlier, wrote his or her own reference letter.
And then just got the department head to sign.
Yeah, to agree to it.
Okay.
Yeah, and it worked. But it won't work in every situation, but you really have to see if this letter is really important to you, right? And your supervisor doesn't want to endorse this, maybe you have to think a little bit out of the box sometimes.
Are there some top tips that you would recommend in broaching this conversation without making it seem like, hey, I actually want to leave this place now. Can you just help me leave this place?
Okay. So one of the ways would be, you can frame it as you're collecting your doing a professional recollection or reflection.
Okay.
Of like, I'm trying to, understand what are some of my strengths.
Yeah. So it's just that time of year. I'm just putting things together.
I'm doing some reflection.
Okay.
Could you write me a letter, or if it's weird, right? Why would you want a letter on a letterhead? Write on my LinkedIn profile,
Yeah.
right? So that I want to start to keep a dossier, a record of all these things. Maybe you might want to say that you're thinking about going for some training, and having a recommendation letter like this could help you, to get admitted into some of the schools that you are thinking about. If let's say you're taking executive education, all these will become really good nomination letters, right, for you. Yeah, don't be afraid to even talk about it in the first place, because I don't know, some of us, we really, like Justin, his starting point is asking for a letter will sabotage my career.
Yeah.
But does it really do that? I think that's an assumption that we have to test out a little bit more, right?
Okay, so don't be too afraid to broach that conversation topic. Telling your boss it's just that time of year. I just want to know my own performance. I'm doing a review of myself. And then if you can't get your boss's sign off, try to go with a different supervisor within the company, or try to get a character reference from someone who would be more willing to endorse you as a person.
Yeah. Social media is really huge.
Right.
Really, really huge nowadays. If you can't get one person to advocate for you, you'd be surprised that there could be people who really know you well from your industry, and they could use the power of social media to help you to lift up that professional brand that you have. Because, sometimes we just get that terrible supervisor who refuses to do anything good for us, and we shouldn't be held, hostage to that kind of relationship.
Yeah. Well, Justin, I hope that answers your question that you sent in to us. Thank you so much for writing to us. For the rest of you, if you have a question just like Justin for a workplace dilemma that you're facing or anything to do with the workplace, write to us. We are at cnapodcast@mediacorp.com.sg.
I'm Gerald.
And I'm Nat. Remember, a strong job application isn't about more documents. It's about the right ones at the right stage.